Growing up, whenever my brother would get hurt, I'd blame it on my fairy friends. My parents never believed me, and I'd get punished. It didn't help that my older brother said I was the one who pushed him or punched him or scratched him. No matter how much I protested, at the end of it all, I was the one who got in trouble. So, at a young age, I learned I was the only one who could see the fairies. For some time, it was a mixed blessing. Having friends only I could see meant that there wasn't anyone who could tell them to leave me alone or that they had to go home because I needed to go to bed. It was nice to never feel lonely. The issue, unfortunately, was that the fairies were mischievous. They'd rarely listen when I told them to stop doing something. They would just laugh and float about and continue with their fun. Most of the time it was harmless, albeit obnoxious. They'd flutter their little wings under someone's nose and make them sneeze, or they'd knock someone's elbow against the glass and spill their drink all over the table. That kind of thing. On occasion, however, their activities were more serious, especially when it came to my older brother. The fairies didn't like how Todd would talk to me. I didn't think much of it. I was the younger brother, and he was my bratty teenage brother. I just thought that's how the world worked. The fairies begged to differ, and they wanted to make it known. That's why they scratched and hit him. It went on for years as his treatment of me got worse and worse. On a Saturday morning, when I was in bed being lazy and listening to the rainfall outside, I heard a muffled scream from Todd's room on the other side of the wall. The scream was followed by retching and gagging, and Todd shrieked past my doorway and into the bathroom, where he vomited loudly and often. My parents noticed the commotion and came to his aid. A shout was loud enough to cut through the sound of Todd's puking, and Dad swore. That scared me. He never did that. I stood in the doorway while the fairies giggled and floated in an iridescent orbit around my head. I knew whatever they'd done to my brother had to be worse than things they'd done in the past. My father stormed from the bathroom and entered Todd's room. He came back a second later with his fist full of something. He stood in front of me, eyes glazed with rage and disgust. "What the hell is wrong with you?" he hissed and opened his hand. I shrieked with surprise and disgust when I saw what he held. It was the body of a small bird, a sparrow. Maybe that was cut up and bleeding. Dislodged feathers stuck to the blood and greasy white discharge oozing from his truncated rear half. "Do you have any idea how sick your brother can get from this?" Dad asked. Behind his rage was a tone of deep concern and even fear. His fear only amplified my own. I didn't," I stammered, and my eyes darted back and forth as I followed the hysterical laughing fairies as they swept back and forth across the carnage in my father's palm. "Stay here," Dad ordered. "But," I tried to interject, but he grabbed my shoulder hard with his free hand and held me against the doorframe. The din of giggles stopped. I heard them whispering among themselves. Dad leaned down and pushed his forehead against mine. When he spoke, his words were clear and smelled like the coffee he'd been drinking. "You are not to say another word. You are not to leave this room. I am taking your brother to the doctor, and if your mother tells me you said anything or set foot outside, I promise you will regret it." He squeezed my shoulder harder, and I winced and tried to fight back tears. He stared at me for a full 10 seconds without saying anything. Then he let me go. I turned the corner to head downstairs, and I saw what was coming, but was too afraid to speak up. As he started down, I saw the fairies hurl themselves against the bottom of his foot before it made contact with the first step. His foot landed awkwardly and his ankle twisted, sending him face first onto the uncarpeted wooden steps. The sound of his face impacting with the stairs seemed louder than anything I'd ever heard. Mom called from the bathroom where she was still attending to Todd. Dad didn't answer. I peeked around the corner. He was on his belly at the bottom of the stairs. He was moaning and weakly flailing his arms against the hard wood. His legs were still on the steps, but they didn't move at all. Mom came out and down the hall, glaring at me before turning the corner and seeing her husband. She gasped and rushed to his aid. Not wanting to make them any angrier than they already were, I turned back into my room. I winced when I put pressure on my right ankle and limped back to bed, where I sat and stared at the fairies. They were laughing again. They flew like a shimmering, animated constellation around the room, weaving in and out of closets and drawers and galoshes. My ankle throbbed. The fairies formed a line in the air and held the formation for a moment. Then they made a beeline for the dusty corner behind my dresser. They burst into peals of uproarious laughter and blinked out a few. As the faint sound of sirens in the distance entered my ears, I gingerly walked to where the fairies had gone. I noticed a tiny feather, then another, and another. When I reached the dresser and peered behind it, it was a clump of feathers and some blood right next to a small knife from our kitchen. Felt a pang of confused, disconnected recognition, but was shocked back to my senses by a fresh wave of pain from my foot and ankle. I sat on the floor with my back against the dresser. I pulled out the leg of my pajama pants and examined my ankle. It was swollen and red. The top of my foot hurt too, and I drew my knee to my chest so I could get a closer look. Again, I felt confused and out of place. The sirens were loud and close, but I wasn't paying attention to them anymore. I looked around for my fairy friends, but they were nowhere to be seen. For the first time, when I desperately needed to ask them a question, they were gone. My confusion grew teeth, and fear pricked the skin of my back and neck. My ankle hurt, but that wasn't what was scaring me. It was my foot. Because even though I watched the fairies trip my dad, for some reason, the imprint of his work boot was etched in the skin of my foot, and my heel was stippled with tiny handprints.
This concludes our story. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the content. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.